Wait,
This
is theocratic. So this
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, yeah.
This is probably more
Moses?
theocratic in nature than anything.
She needs a minute.
I'm having a little freak out here. Moses,
Was a founding father.
the biblical. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Alix Jules and
Everyone point. You got a point. There we go. Okay.
back on the show is TJ, Britt, and Courtney. Interesting
I got
topics. Go for it.
TJ, why do you hate black people? They're atheists.
Or
Because
they're people that just never thought much about religion.
I find that most Christians don't actually believe what they say they believe, right? I mean, that's a given.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Or there's like entire topics about it that people have never even considered. Things like original sin, or things like original sin being tied so closely to Adam and Eve, and that sort of being in question because of certain scientific things. Like there's certain medical and scientific advances that really call into question these things, but people don't realize that they do, or how deeply they do, unless they're more in the atheistic community where you're kind of talking about these topics in a much more intellectual way.
I want to go back to something that you said, which is the atheist community, or what I call the secular movement, being very different than the actual atheist demographic, because that's something that I've argued for years. In fact, I think what you get is a very skewed sample size. Why is that? Wait. Because I made the statement back in 2008, 2009 that sometimes coming out in the atheist movement, it's really caustic to your skin, especially if you're black, right? Because it's not something. So we went through this phase of being invisible, tokenized, to being shunned. Darryl Ray used to talk about this years ago, and I remember having this conversation when he came down to Texas, where the joiners, the people that are actually part of the secular community, we're talking about maybe the 5%, maybe the 1% of the people that are atheists, that will read atheist blogs, that will watch atheist podcasts, etc. And even when you take a look at some of the celebrities, etc., that's still a very small number in terms of how many atheists actually exist.
You try to say this is the only place you can go in your town or in your community, and we can welcome you and we can provide you with that sense of community and belonging with people, just us.
Okay, but the reality, it would be great. It would be great if we could do that, but we failed. We failed doing that. And so what we had once upon a time is this intellectual stronghold that said, if you're smart, if you are smart in academia, because this is where a lot of the atheist movement kind of flourished once upon a time ago, was in the universities. Free thought this, critical thinkers that, blah, blah, blah. This is what's going to set you free. And then it changed. It's no longer that, because I think a lot of the movement figured out that there are different ways and different paths to free thought. Because a lot of people will talk about the divisiveness that exists here or there, where I would say that those aren't necessarily areas of division. It's how we define ourselves and cohere our identities in general. So when we start talking about African American issues, if you're a Black atheist, or if you're a trans person and you happen to be an atheist, and the intersection of these other issues, well, they impact your life. And when we talk about how secularism impacts your life, most people, when it comes to any kind of theology or ideology, it's always going to be about themselves. There's no demand or compulsion, to make it about anything else.
People happen to go through that transition, especially if it was traumatic in any way, and then they want to be an activist. Maybe they're in their angry phase still of being an atheist, and some people never leave the angry phase.
It depends on what you're angry about.
Yeah, but you were talking about common values across the board, or even people being able to relate to one another instead of just like being concerned about themselves. I mean, it's hard to kind of get over that, and
it's biologically rooted. I mean, it's kind of hard to get over that when it's very difficult to.
Yeah, but it seems like it's exacerbated a little bit, like when they were raised and indoctrinated basically.
Yeah. People sort of galvanized around that, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if you weren't part of that community at all, it was still really exciting to have that happening and to have to see it go the way that it did. But so I'm not sure that it would be that it's always a personal issue that has to drive you to be involved. But you went to a rally.
I went to a rally.
No, I know you-
I absolutely. I went to a rally.
Alex went to a Trump rally.
I went to a
That's
Trump
what we're
rally,
referring to.
and I got the Trump sign. I got a MAGA hat. And I am still, I don't know how to get off the mailing list, but every few days I get an email from the administration. It's always fundraising, right? And it's actually,
he's already got his re-election campaign.
So the funniest thing,
Yeah.
right, was I got an email from Mike Pence, right? And it says Mike Pence, and it said in your neighborhood. And I'm reading this, right, and I'm thinking, who are the racists in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood. That's all I can sing, right?
Oh
I'm
my
like, it's
God.
terrible, Mr. Rogers, but right, who are the
Oh,
racists
no.
in
He was
your
a
neighborhood?
Presbyterian minister, by the way,
I
who never mentioned religion or God at all, ever. In his
Until-
like 20 something odd year like kid show or whatever.
until. And I had Dr. Zachary Moore went with me. It's a funny story because I was on another podcast and I was joking around about this, and someone said, would it be okay if white people had white men had safe spaces? And I said, well, what do you call Congress? And then and then they said, that's not fair. That's not fair. I said, okay, a Trump rally. And to that response, I got, well, you've never been. And so I'm like, well, that's true. I've never been to a Trump rally, so let me go. And so I really thought about it. And even, it was crazy because even some of my conservative friends, and I still have conservative friends, they saw, I posted this on social media, and they were begging me, don't go, please don't go. Now, Zach is much larger than I am,
Who was
towering. Zach Moore.
Zach Moore.
Zach
Okay.
Moore, yeah.
Yeah, he's got like a foot on him or something like that. Almost.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
He's a big guy, and
Yeah.
he's a little bit bigger than as well as last February. And he shows up, and he's wearing an American flag as a cape.
He went all out.
He went all out. Cowboy boots, cowboy hat, shades, and he was Captain America.
Oh.
And he walks up to me, and I'm like, the first 30 seconds, he doesn't even acknowledge me. I'm like, he's in the character. And I've got my camera and I've got my press pass with me, and I'm like, these are going to protect me, because if someone really does step to me, then I'm like, I got you on film, right?
Yeah.
And many of the observers immediately did think that I was with the press, and I had my credentials with me at the time. But they're like, okay, so we obviously won't mess with you, because we'll make it on the 6 o'clock news.
Like, there was kind of an open rhetoric that did get on camera of people
Very much so.
shouting things and getting angry at people
my goodness.
and
Oh my
inciting
goodness.
actual violence and stuff.
There were I saw an exchange between he was either a doctor or a surgeon, not a vet, a doctor or surgeon.
I like your face with that.
and he's talking to, I think she must have been 16 or 17-year-old Latino girl, and she's there and she's protesting, very quietly with a couple of her friends, which is her right, she's there, whatever. And he is shouting her down and tearing her down, and he didn't say that. I'm like,
little kid.
she's literally quoting word for word. She printed it out and she's like showing, man, what he said. That's not what he meant. I'm like, my mom tells me stories because she grew up in New York. My mom tells me that she actually came from the West Indies, and she came here in the 60s, and she tells me she bought a little brownstone in Brooklyn. Investment, by the way. But she talks about trying to get into some of the areas and suburbs and not being able to, even in the 70s and early 80s, being able to buy, even if she said, I'm close to buying the house outright, and they will not let me. It wasn't a money thing, it was a race thing. They wouldn't let her buy the house. It's called redlining. Redlining.
So back to the Trump rally thing.
Yes.
Were you the one who you ended up talking to some of the vendors outside?
I totally did.
Yeah.
I talked to everyone who would talk to me. I was like, some of them would let me film, some would let me do audio. The vendors, many of there were African American vendors out front.
Yeah.
And I would walk up to them and like, so tell me about your support. Like, I don't support it. Come on, man. It's like, I'm here trying to make some money. I got to eat. And then what was really funny was there was a guy that was selling trumpets out front. He happened to be white. And I'm like, okay, so you, I mean, I went ahead and made the assumption like, so you support Trump? It's like, no, I'm voting for Hillary. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? It's like, yes, but I mean, these trumpets are brilliant, right? I'm like,
we got a comment. In the 70s in Ontario, Canada, a petition went around my neighborhood to prevent a man from selling his house to a black family. My dad tore it up and threw it into the petitioner's face. There are already tons of signatures on it, bro.
Yeah. Common. I mean, when we talk about the in America, I don't know if you're familiar with the Green Books. All right, so this was, I want to say it was the 20s and 30s. There was the Green Books that were put out by postmasters, and they're still relevant today. I've been trying to get them. I continue to petition. We need to update the Green Books and put them out there. The Green Books were put out by postmasters that would tell you where it was not safe American to actually travel. Like when I went to, it was great then. It's still relevant now. I think
it's clearly drawn on where all those places are now, though, isn't it?
I thought it was until I went to Kansas. Right, I went to, what's it, Kansas? And I was giving a talk in Kansas, and someone said, "Don't go too far north." I'm like, "What? Why?"
Road or
it's like exactly, because it's like you're going to Fort so and so.
Somebody just say don't go any farther.
And this was white organizers, and it's like, hey, you want to stay down here and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, hold on. And my response was, why? It's like, well, if you go too far north, if you go right, why? Right, like if you go too far north, right? White Pride Radio is still on air. So what you're looking for is Google Scholar specifically. So which is I know.
Google Scholar.
Scholar, I think it's scholar.google.com. Or use any kind of academic search engine that you have. Google Scholar happens to be one of them. It's AI based on what your browsing history is. You're looking specifically for literature that has been peer reviewed. You can set, years, etc., and various context parameters. It's right there.
No, but a lot of people don't know that about Google specifically, that it's very biased to their own search history.
People don't know that?
No, they don't. Well, not
really?
At least maybe the older generations.
No, I know they
like my parents can't tell the difference between an advertisement and an article. Like
correct.
And I know that's been studied with young people as well.
Correct.
But like they can't tell the difference when they click on something that it's going to send them to another link, and they just don't know. Yeah,
imagine what happens. And there's been I think Facebook has been messing with it, and so is Google. What do you do when you can actually see what is promoted as an advertiser sponsored link? They're toying with the idea of removing that highlight.
That's really scary.
So you can't
That's
tell
terrifying.
If it's an ad or not?
That's terrifying.
Yeah,
because America likes fake news. America likes fake news that makes them feel good about themselves.
Get out of that echo chamber a little bit, and you start to look up certain things
interested in looking it up though.
Well, just something I
I'm
did.
interested.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Brits
So
explored this too. But when you get out of that, you really start to see just a little bit of what they are hearing. And it is astounding. It's really scary.
It is. I call it the Fox effect, where we get into the whole 55% of white Americans believe that they're discriminated against by it.
I have heard that.
Right. Well, it's
so
it's
weird.
it's it's an interesting.
Against, but not because I'm a white male, but because I'm an atheist.
Oh, well, that's different. That's yeah. That's
they're talking about
different.
solely
We're talking
because of
about
that.
based
I
on
don't have
race.
any,
Yeah.
but I can still have the conversation.
Oh,
Be like, what do we do?
Wait, now,
No.
no, I agree. You can have the conversation, but one of the problems that I tend to find with people in general, I don't think everyone should be talking about race. Specifically, I don't think everyone should be talking about race when it comes to it outside of being opinion, right? You can have an opinion, etc. But what I find to be very discouraging when it comes to discussing race is I had to learn one set of history that we all had to learn, right? We all had to learn that, and that is white American history or American history, which is, as we know, slightly biased. In fact, we have in Texas, where we have examples in Texas, in Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, and the South in general, the old Confederacy, where I said old Confederacy, don't blow up my inbox, where we see that there's been a whitewashing of history, where we don't want to call it slavery, we want to call it an involuntary migration or stuff like that. The actual standard and what we've been trying to do with changing. Come on, you want Moses to be considered
It's known by most scholars is to be an amalgam of actually 3 different characters.
Doesn't matter.
From pre-biblical
Doesn't
texts.
matter.
And
He
he's
was
not really a real guy.
He is a founding father
What?
of America, right?
Oh,
I mean,
okay. You're saying that these people are saying that.
Right,
Like,
right. This is what they were
They
really
think
pushing.
that
They were
apparently
really
somehow,
pushing for
yeah.
that.
Wait,
It's,
But this is theocratic. So this
I haven't
probably
heard that
more-
one.
Oh, yeah.
This is probably more
Moses?
theocratic in nature than anything.
she needs a minute.
I'm having a little freak out here.
Yeah.
Moses,
Was a founding father.
the biblical. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Look. With me. Okay, say it with me. All right, you good?
Moses gave us the
Okay,
Constitution.
hold on.
Oh no. Oh no.
Say it with me. Founding
Oh, man.
father. There we go.
Okay, so
It wasn't even a real guy.
what's significant about Texas in particular?
You and your facts, you and your alternative facts don't matter.
Oh man.
Go ahead.
So what's significant about Texas in particular with textbooks is that Texas is the one, the books that they published are overwhelmingly the ones that are dispensed to the rest of the U.S.
Because of the buying size.
Yeah.
Because of the buying size.
So
right?
they are, if you have something that's published a certain way or says a certain thing in a textbook in Texas, that's going to affect the entire school district of the entire country.
It's the Southwest. Southwest. The Southwest.
Okay. And R and Raw, I remember.
Yes,
this
absolutely.
Was
this is Aaron and Lalandra made
2-3 years ago?
a big deal about it.
They were
Absolutely.
arguing. They had to come up to a board
Yes.
that was deciding. And they
The
were
Texas
arguing
State Board of
against.
Education.
Yes, they were arguing against what was written in the textbooks at that point. One example was the Trail of Tears being described in the textbook as a migration that
Correct.
brought many people to Christ.
Exactly.
That's what it was described as.
So I just so the camera's there. So say
Yeah.
it with me.
So-
Say it with me now. Moses was a founding father. There you go.
Oh,
It was. Do you remember the American Atheist billboard that had the whole slave thing and people just completely lost their minds over it?
whatever.
And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, but that's kind of valid, right? I mean, that was me back then. And I'm like,
This is what's happening in your brain, kids.
okay. And I was like, what if and this is how bad I used to be. I was like, I should get that in a t-shirt and just walk in and, go have a conversation with a few churches. Yes, that's it. Slaves obey your masters. terrible.
Even the cruel ones is the following.
How do you say that?
Yes,
before?
it was
Which
terrible.
non-believers is that? What is that?
It's American Atheist.
American Atheist.
Colossians.
Oh,
That was Colossians.
wow.
Colossians 3.
Colossians
So how do you
3:22.
feel about that?
And I'm thinking at the time, I'm thinking, you know what? I'd probably turn that into a t-shirt myself and go have conversations. That's not how you have conversations. And if you are a humanist that is trying to actually talk about racial injustice or any kind of injustice, or let's just say justice in general, when you want to talk about racial issues, turns out that still 95% of African Americans are religious. So you kind of need to leave that t-shirt at the door. So the first step that I tell people, if they're trying to increase diversity in humanism, is you need to meet people where they meet, where they are. You need to get very uncomfortable. You need to cross the tracks. You need to have real conversations about their issues. You can't just make it about yourself and you. It can't be about increasing your numbers. It's about helping them.
Can we just talk about like the not believing in a God thing? Like,
okay, so hold on, but that's fine. Hold on, but that's fine as long as you are willing to not be hypocritical about it. Wait. As long as you're not going to be hypocritical about it, because when I stand up and I want to talk about race, because you want to talk about diversity, let's talk about diversity because that's what you want to talk about. However, when you have someone like Sam Harris that decides all of a sudden that despite never reading a book on it, regardless of his credentials, because that doesn't matter. Wow. That doesn't matter. Decides that he wants to talk about identity politics, something he doesn't clearly understand, you're willing to denounce him then too, and tell him to shut up and talk specifically, hold on, and only talk about atheism. And only talk about atheism.
Yeah, we get
right? Because that's gotta be it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're only gonna talk about atheism, that's all you talk about. And nothing else. Either that.
Nobody's telling anybody.
Or you're one-sided.
The thing is though, is that I'm also not standing up and saying, hey, shut up.
Which also means you get to tell Richard Dawkins to never say anything about feminism, which also means that you get to tell Sargon that he doesn't get to talk about it either. He should only be talking about atheism, the one thing that we agree on. Now, what kind of echo chamber does that create? Same thing with many of the other podcasters, which I won't mention right now.
This is from
all right, preach, man.
So what?
Well, I almost went there.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
That's pretty close, right?
It's a good sermon.
Thank you very much.
Switching gears a little.
That's debatable.
So since you're a white woman, could you please explain to me why 53% of white women voted for Trump?
Oh, that's the Christian evangelicals.
That makes sense.
My mama.
My mama too. That's
so if we're gonna talk about the patriarchy, we have to start there. 53% of white women decided they were gonna go for Trump. I mean, so do you believe that within that construct that we can actually have a white woman president?
No.
Really?
Well, if
wait a minute, she said no.
Well, that makes sense. I mean,
they don't think
that voting demographic.
They think that men are the head of the household, and if a woman can't lead the household, they certainly can't lead a country. I mean,
well, but not all of those women maybe voted for that reason though, because there was a big part of the voting demographic that wanted her to not be more of the same. And
help me, TJ.
They give themselves other reasons. They're like, oh,
come
we
on,
can't trust Hillary. We can't.
No, you gotta tell.
Which I'm gonna give them that much. I mean, surely there might have been some distrustful things that she had done. I mean, but
get in school.
No. Tell. No. You gotta
what?
Tell me. No.
Why?
No. You scared me.
Come on, no.
Because once upon a time, I said, and this was not too long ago, this is probably 12 years ago, no way does America 12 years ago, and I still believe 12 years ago, that America votes in an African-American president. 12 years ago. I'm like, no way does that ever happen.
So that was actually his election year, though, wasn't it? Like,
no. It was like 9.5 years ago, like that.
Well, I think we can. I think a female president could be voted in.
So what do you mean by that? Like you?
I was full on wrong.
You let your guard.
Which, by the way, and several people have reminded me of this. It is actually hip hop culture is now recognized by United Nations as a specific culture. So it kind of exists without race, because we know that contributions can happen without race. So it's a hip hop culture. One of the things that you have to address is wealth inequality. That's something that you just have to do.
How do you fix that?
You can't.
You can't.
You really can't.
Well, then we're just screwed.
so,
Yeah. Entirely. You're entirely screwed.
Podcast is over, everybody.
Well,
we
okay.
solved it,
Yeah. So addressing and this is funny, because this is where a lot of the arguments with the US's new populist message comes from. It's wealth inequality. And yes, absolutely. If you can address wealth inequality, you can actually address some of those disparities, which go across some of the racial issues as well. Right?
Yeah.
Would we actually consider universal basic income in this country with the incoming, with the increasing automation that actually is occurring? My background is actually IT, intelligence, etc. So this is something that I actually study for a living. And the reality is, no, we won't. So this only perpetuates itself.
Well, I mean,
but how do you
fix it?
Yeah.
You can't.
Well,
if you can't,
Alex, you're here for answers.
Okay. So all right.
So I think where you're going with this, though, is the only way to fix it is to disenfranchise some people for the benefit of some other.
No. What I'm saying is that's already happened.
Okay.
You're exactly. So you need to go exactly. I'm saying that's already happened. LBJ talked about it several years ago.
Now we actually have an existent welfare program now in this country. I mean, it's.
Can we talk about that? Is it either is it helping or hurting more? What do you think? Well,
it's both.
Yes to both.
Yes to both, because of other issues that are contributing to it.
Well,
I grew up with a one parent single parent home.
And why was that?
And because my dad was a POS.
Okay. Why was that?
Why was that?
I'm gonna keep asking why.
Why? It had nothing to do with welfare. It had nothing to do with anything that he liked to sleep around.
No, but,
and it had hold on. No.
Why was that socially acceptable?
What? Because we came from the Caribbean and we didn't.
And socially acceptable. It's just a thing that just happens.
It is something that it is something that.
But it happens 70% of the time now in young Black American homes, as opposed to 20%.
I think he's getting
bum.
So is there 3 times as much racism?
So why is it that you don't like Black people again?
Oh no.
No, I mean it's a question.
You're gonna be in a meme now.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So this is where the actual conversation here does get significantly more nuanced, because it's not an if or, it's an and discussion, right? So when we start talking about policy and how policy has affected the behavior, etc., absolutely true. But when you take a look at the other side of policies, such as policing, over-policing, and how specifically the war on drugs has impacted
that's a whole other level.
The African-American home, which you cannot exclude and be intellectually honest in the discussion at all.
Yes.
Especially not with the many revelations. You just cannot. So private prisons, and of course we have the occasional case where we've seen that judges, one particular judge in particular, so of course we've got to say that all of the judges do it now, have shown that they really were slanting the decisions so that they could get kickbacks from private prisons with high prosecution. Remember that case?
Well,
It's an ongoing situation, and we know that when you take a look at the judicial rates, etc., of incarceration, it's like you gotta ask questions. It's like just in New York alone, stop and frisk. I mean, that was like, God, that's a nightmare itself. Why is it now that the opioid in the United States today is a problem that requires compassion and treatment, and yet 30 some odd years ago the crack epidemic was you need more prisons?
Wow.
Again, this is a remnant of, and we cannot dismiss our history in making these decisions.
Australia selective hiring campaign to ensure gender balance in the police force. Would you support a similar measure that would increase the number of men in predominantly women, like nursing, primary psychology?
What do you think?
I think no.
Is it diversity for diversity's sake, or is it diversity for the increase and improvement of treatment for the population?
Yeah, but it's not.
I see what you're saying, because they're a source of authority. Like
let's say that it's not a source of authority. Let's say that certain men tend to, in some cultural context matters, right, will react better and deal better with men in nursing, etc. Well, I mean, we know why.
I'm
dismiss why, but of course,
a lot of people don't realize that,
right?
Exactly.
But
come on, seriously,
you pick up on it in the workforce, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, when
I go into the doctor's office, I don't want a woman touching me just because it's weird.
Right. So who do you want?
You know what I'm saying?
Who do you want to ask to? Who do you want to ask? Yeah. Who would you prefer ask you to cough?
Yeah.
Every guy
gets police officers.
And it's not because I have some internalized hatred of women.
No. And
it's because I feel I hold women in a special regard. So I don't want a woman like medically handling.
Wait, I got this. So why don't you hold Black people in that same regard?
So Alex, would you?
No, it's another man. This other man.
I'm gonna keep messing with you.
If women just don't naturally prefer the police force as much as the men, let's just say they don't make the choice to go into law enforcement.
Oh, okay, as a career. Okay.
Then would you support an Australian initiative to bring that to equal numbers?
You're kind of adding in
the preference.
You're prefacing that with
Some
a
jobs
fact
are preferred by
that a lot of people don't know. That.
No,
can we say that is?
I guess I'm fucking in this.
Can we say that?
Yeah. Can we say that that's true and an independent variable and not subject to cultural variables?
Right.
Because
like not inherent.
NFL linebacker, crab fisherman, deep sea welder.
You're going to extreme examples, though.
Yeah, there's some that because of our sexual dimorphism.
Okay, but again, like fields like that, like being a fireman, it's not
women do not want to be construction workers. Women do not want to be plumbers. They don't want to be working in the sewers.
Right?
They also don't like working at Google, evidently.
Women are wired to be nurtured, like to be able to nurture a child, like a child that comes out of.
Okay, I'm gonna get way on this side over here.
We're getting into psychology, baby.
Yeah.
We can say that's definitely not conclusive.
Science daily.
In the least.
Infants prefer toys tied to their gender at birth.
Have you seen this?
Are you seriously now doing the what is it, Reddit bingo? You are doing Reddit bingo.
With firemen, there are less women in that position, right? But part of that can be the screening process of upper body versus lower body fitness with training to be firemen, and you don't
Not just
necessarily
with training. It's
with-
just the
with
way
a-
that the
with-
body develops.
well,
So-
like when you're in the actual task of being in that field, yes, but the requirements for you to get your certification for that favors men over women
Yeah,
physically.
Absolutely.
side of
Would you be in favor of women-only platoons that didn't have the same specific barrier to entry? So instead of carrying a 55-pound Alice pack,
Mhm.
you only needed a 35-pound Alice pack or a 25-pound
Maybe.
Alice pack, so that when you were dragging someone out
Mhm.
of a hole, of a
Yeah.
foxhole, it was a woman and not a guy,
Right.
which is really very.
makes
It
sense.
tends to be a gendered
Yeah.
test.
Yeah. And I think recognizing, it's just like, for me, just like learning disabilities, you have to find your own way to achieve the same task. And it may be using certain tools to even that playing field, or making a difference of who you're surrounded with and what tasks you work on as a group versus just mixing everyone up and expecting everyone to meet this certain bar in a
Yeah.
certain way. Because I think that's the difference, is you can still meet that bar. You just may have to reach it in a different way. And that's what's not accounted for in certification.
A
Like
different way.
In different ways.
firefighting. Like firefighting, women can just as easily be a firefighter in the actual field.
Okay.
But the requirement to get into that certification, to pass that test, it favors men
It favors men
physically.
because-
So
No, hold on. Is there a reason outside of a cultural bias?
Yes,
Yeah, upper
yes,
body
see,
strength
the
is important.
ability to do the
that's
job.
Hold on,
what I'm
wait,
saying, is
but-
when they're
but is the
actually in the
question-
field.
How is
it
biased?
So hold on. Is what's important? So I guess this is the question: is upper body strength important, or is it being able to pick up the person, throwing them over the shoulder, and doing a fireman's carry more important than actually testing for upper
Yeah,
body
then you gotta
strength?
be able.
The minimum basic requirement to be a firefighter is tied, or it should be, and if it's not, it should be.
Mhm.
It's to run 100 meters, pick up a 180-pound dummy, and drag them backwards back to the starting point.
Mhm.
The physical fitness test to become a firefighter is directly proportional, directly related to what you're going to do in the field. Less women can pass that. That's a fact.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is that in the actual field, that may be disproportionately filtering out people that would be able to perform in the actual
Yeah.
field.
How's that?
This is the study that Britt and I were referring to. It's not a Reddit bingo. This was we actually saw an entire documentary on this. But
Yeah.
children as young as 9 months old prefer to play with toys specific to their own gender, and this is from a actual
Yeah.
legit. Oh,
Mhm.
what?
Okay, what does that have to do with anything? What would that mean?
Choices you make, career choices.
Career
Why
choices.
there's disproportionate number of 80% of psychologists are female, or secondary.
What does that have to do
education.
with
Women
that?
are better at different things than men.
Wait, what?
The original question was,
Not-
should
Like
us
better things?
We're
or worse
different.
things?
Australia-
But what does that have to
First
do with the
responders.
toys?
First responders.
Mhm.
What does that have to do with the toys they prefer?
Psychological development of a child
Yeah.
Yeah.
based on their gender.
Okay, the preference of a child's toy.
Based
What does
on
that
their
have
gender,
to do
male or
with what the
female.
rules should be of what qualifies someone to enter
That
the field
it's-
of being a
it's
fireman?
Well,
Unnecessary
inform it,
to try to
Directly,
equalize.
it just we're giving it as an example.
Okay, but
Our
how would
things are
that?
different.
How would the toys a child prefers smashes cultural what?
Gender cultural roles.
How does that do
That
that?
a gender role is 100% cultural.
Okay, stop. How does one study?
It doesn't.
Okay.
It
Just-
it gives you pause
But
Does it?
does it?
a little, maybe.
Depending
I
on
saw
depending on the strength of the study.
There's other studies that back it up, and Britt and I saw this the entire documentary just based on these studies.
Okay, but okay, how does it demonstrate that specifically? How does it demonstrate striking down at all the idea that
Career
gender?
choice.
What?
You're talking career choice.
I'm saying, how does the toys that are preference, which is only a personal preference, right? How does that inform career choice?
But I mean, are we really saying that we're putting an undue like bullshit like roadblock in the way of women becoming police officers? Though is that what the charge is?
Wait a minute.
again?
Are you saying women can be police officers?
No, I'm asking a question. What I'm asking is what you're saying that we're like being discriminatory, like people are being discriminatory towards women in their police department because they're putting these like restrictions on who can be a police officer and who can't?
What I would say from a layman perspective on that.
I mean, do you think it's
No, don't be a layman.
But
incorrect discrimination, or do you think
I would think it's unintentional screening out.
Atheist Edge. Walking the edge of what some consider offensive. But your feelings don't matter here, only facts. Edgy commentary on the dangers of doctrine, the foibles of faith, the bullshit of belief, the stupidity of superstition, and the idiocy of indoctrination. With razor-sharp wit, curiosity, and critical thought, we take an unblinking look at today's religions. We are Atheist Edge.